targeted.
The whole healthcare system would be affected.
I would lose my job over this.
Well, we can't let the public know.
We just rebranded as misinformation.
Are you recording this?
Releasing this information would fundamentally undermine public trust.
For decades, I've been immersed in medical data, not just studying it, but digitally archiving it, indexing, and now with AI, crunching the insights from thousands of books and over 38 million medical studies. Combined with my first-hand experience in functional medicine since 2020, this journey has forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth buried within the data. This isn't like any video series you've ever seen. My personal philosophy is simple. If you don't have a solution, you're just whining. It's easy to point fingers at big pharma, colluding politicians, big business, and dogmatic scientists who prioritize ego and profit over the genuine love of truth. I have a solution. The hardest truth is this. What I've discovered is that the very foundations supporting the entire medical framework, Eastern, Western, functional, integrative, alternative, even the latest biohacking trends, are fundamentally inadequate, to put it politely. This isn't about critiquing any specific industry or player. It's about the very bedrock of biomedical science itself. I know this is an outrageous claim, but I can scientifically prove it. In conventional studies, they use what's called evidence-based medicine. Yet humans are incredibly complex and data always presents a wide range. The standard practice involves trimming or truncating outlier data to make the results appear more robust. I fundamentally disagree with this. In fact, it's almost backwards. Why should we ignore the outliers? We should deep dive and study them. That's where the real secrets and truth live. If everyone is exposed to a deadly pathogen but one person isn't affected, conventional science's policy is to ignore them because they don't fit the data set. I do the opposite. I study them in depth. In short, this is a story about outliers, because outliers are where we find the truth.
And have you ever wondered about these outliers? The ones who eat freely and stay trim, who seem immune to illness, who look decades younger than they are, and whose relationships are still magical and exhilarating? After decades of studying these outliers, we have found they all share the same commonalities. The best part about this video series is we have decoded why, and will not only share their secrets, but teach you step by step how they did it. As we embark on this journey, and it's a journey, each video will give another piece to the puzzle. And I'll be honest and upfront, we don't possess every single piece. The technology simply doesn't exist. But watch closely, and continually ask yourself one question. Can you see the picture emerging, even without all the puzzle pieces? We are not going to just dismantle. We're going to offer a new path, showing you what all the data is really saying and precisely how to actually apply the science to improve every aspect of your life. Any effort to heal without considering the other fundamental truths is destined to fail. And I don't expect you to take my word for it. I will show you irrefutable science and extraordinary evidence and let you decide. These videos are broken up into smaller segments. Part 1 lays the essential foundations about truth, science, and what the evidence is actually pointing to. I ask that you keep an open mind and just watch Part 1. If the science doesn't resonate with you or it deeply challenges you in a way that you find uncomfortable, you don't even have to bother with Part 2. Part 2 is a practical applications of Part 1's discoveries. There's also Part 3, which is an invitation only, presenting the largest mountain of evidence for the model being presented. So let's start this puzzle together and begin exactly where we should. Truth. I'm going to confess something embarrassing about myself. There is a sentiment that states the ugliness you see in others is the ugliness you see in yourself. It's uncertain where exactly this originates from, but the concept worries me quite a bit. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. There's lots of quotes that kind of share the same sentiment. These worry me because the most unattractive and maddening personality trait or cognitive bias I find in other people is willful ignorance. This is when people will intentionally avoid learning or applying new information that is freely available because that may require them to adopt a new viewpoint, thus admitting they were wrong or duped. So does this mean I have to watch out for this cognitive bias in myself? I think it must. So I'm going to tell you a story about how a single quote changed every aspect of my life forever and how it became a part of my personal foundation for all life. It's from a book published in 1902 called The Power of Truth by William George Jordan. The man who has certain religious belief and fears to discuss it lest it may be proved wrong is not loyal to his belief. He has but a coward's faithfulness to his prejudices. If he were a lover of truth, then he would be willing at any moment to surrender his belief for a higher, better, and truer faith. The man who votes the same ticket in politics year after year without caring for the issues, men, or problems, merely voting in a certain way because he has always voted so, is sacrificing loyalty to truth to a weak, mistaken, and stubborn attachment to a worn-out precedent. Such a man should stay in his cradle all his life because he spent his early years there. And of course, this isn't just about religious beliefs or politics, but all beliefs. It's a lot easier than it sounds, though, because that phrase, be willing at any moment, as I've learned in the reality of humankind, is knocking on the door of impossibility. And to me, that seems impossible. But we're going to do a deep dive and try and figure out why. In Carl Sagan's book, The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark, he points out that, quote, one of the most saddest lessons of history is this. If you've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It is simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. The phenomenon he describes is called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort you feel when you learn the truth about something untrue you have actively believed and participated in for a long time. The embarrassment and shameful judgment levied at oneself and the confusion towards the love and trusted people who initially told you to believe in this falsehood. This is where your brain literally cannot and will not let you adopt a new truth as your viewpoint, unless under a rare exception. Cognitive dissonance could also be defined as the uncomfortable feeling you get when you realize something you've believed in or participated in is actually untrue. It's the internal conflict that makes it hard for people to accept new information that contradicts your existing beliefs, especially if you've publicly committed to them. It's often easier to stick to what you already believe, even if it's wrong, than admit you were mistaken. This is where Leon Festinger, the social psychologist, comes in. He is the one who defined the phrase cognitive dissonance, this embarrassing fact of human nature. In 1954, he and his colleagues infiltrated a doomsday cult that prophesied the end of the world and that the members would be saved by flying saucers. When none of that happened, it seemed obvious that everyone would leave, but as predicted by the psychologist, almost nobody, including a highly educated doctor, abandoned their beliefs, but actually doubled down and started proselytizing more vigorously. Nobody could admit they were duped. That's why it seems to be knocking on the door of impossibility for humans to change their mind when their beliefs are clearly proven false, especially amongst the highly schooled where there is an odd high correlate. How it seems to work is that everybody thinks of themselves as smart, competent people. Everyone seems to be 100% confident of a few foundational facts, which are actually cognitive biases that humans suffer from, as follows. The better-than-average effect, or illusory superiority. Most people overestimate their abilities compared to others. They think they are smarter, more rational, more open-minded, and better at lie detection than others. Thus, they would never fall for a scam, and they would never be conned out of their time, money, or resources. And of course, they are 100% confident they would never join or find themselves in an ideological or group cult. And yet, the truth to our superiority is as titled: illusory. A meta-analysis of 108 studies published in the Forensic Examiner under the title "Who Best Can Catch a Liar" concluded that even seasoned professionals like lawyers, custom agents, judges, police officers, and the FBI and CIA interrogators are no better at detecting lies than the average person. In fact, their accuracy is compared to a coin toss. It's natural to believe that we're the exception to the rule, especially when it comes to something as subjective as lie detection. We all would like to think we have a knack for sniffing out falsehoods. But if you think you're particularly good at spotting liars, you're not alone. And you're likely mistaken. In another study, they compared college students to actual detectives in seeing who could spot the truthfulness of a confession. The police detectives were most confident they were right, and they did worse than the untrained college students. It seems there is an inverse correlate between the quantity of training and experience obtained, confidence, and actual ability, which is pretty scary. It is universal that the more training people have, the more confident they are, even if they're wrong. It's easier to fool people than convince them that they've been fooled. Mark Twain. And here is why I think in modern society there are terrifying compounding effects to cognitive dissonance that we have to deal with. It's because our lives are so much more public now. In social media and heated debates, we have publicly broadcasted, literally to the world, that we have invested time, money, and resources in a belief. When it comes to light, we were duped. It's just too impossibly embarrassing. Evolutionarily, we know that if we lost our tribe, we would die. So as jaw-dropping as this sounds, it can seem like changing your viewpoint literally feels like a life or death situation. Even though saying you were wrong most certainly isn't, but it doesn't address the fact that it still feels that way. We are hardwired to stay with the tribe. And we feel that nobody wants a tribe member who gets duped. That's dangerous to the whole tribe. But there are very, very few exceptional people out there who are different. These people don't cling to their egoic pride. Their dedication is to the truth. They welcome new information and even delight in discovering higher truths. These people, for some reason, can quickly and easily admit they were wrong. It's like no sweat for them. And we like these people, we look up to them. When people are open and vulnerable, we trust them more. And what do we think of the politician who loudly proclaims they are always right and have never made a mistake in the history of their lives? We hate them. We can't stand them. We vilify them for good reason. And yet for some reason we think the tribe will judge our mistakes completely opposite. We put ourselves in quite a conundrum. There is just a tiny minority of people who don't view themselves poorly as publicly admitting they were duped or wrong. For them, it's about the joy of finding higher, truer, and a better way. Now everybody thinks we are already in that noble, tiny, and minority group. We are not. Let's look into that minority and see if we can't find their secrets. Soldier versus Scouts. Julia Galef gave a TED Talk in 2016 entitled, "Why You Think You're Right, Even If You're Wrong," and followed up with a book called The Scout Mindset, Why Some People See Things Clearly and Others Don't, where she expounds cognitive dissonance via a metaphor about the mindset of a soldier and a scout. Soldiers follow orders. They are told what to think and what to do, and they do it without question. Even though lives are on the line, whether those orders are right or wrong, they literally defend their position to death. But a scout has a different purpose. They just seek truth. Learning that the enemy is 10 times stronger than their army might be deadly, but there's no advantage into believing a falsehood. New information that changes their old estimates isn't met with opposition, it's welcomed and relayed up the chain of command. When somebody with a scout mindset encounters new, even contrary information, they welcome it. Accurate information is the priority. If they meticulously count 5,000 enemy troops one day, and then count again the next day and the number is 50,000, They don't hide or cling to the old count. That would be stupid and deadly. They find the new data helpful and share it. But this is where we get hung up. This is where soldiers and scouts butt heads. If a scout told a soldier this, the soldier would be angry and call the scout a misinformation spreader, an enemy denier, or an anti-army-er. Relaying new information won't work with people that act like soldiers. And don't think that scouts are always the way to be, because they are making many mistakes as well. Scouts mostly mistakenly assume that they're talking to fellow scouts. They think a simple update of the truth will bring everyone to the same page, but the scouts are very wrong. While that works with fellow scouts, the vast majority of people claim to be scouts while thinking, identifying, and acting like soldiers. Scouts, while dedicated to the truth, often suffer from their own cognitive biases as well, precisely the illusion of transparency and the curse of knowledge. The illusory transparency is our tendency to overestimate the extent of which our own viewpoint, valuing truth above all else, is apparent to others. The curse of knowledge is the cognitive bias that once you know something, it's impossible to imagine not knowing it. Scouts lament, why can't they see it? It's just so clear. Why wouldn't everyone want to know this truth? They mistakenly assume their own value for factual accuracy is universally shared, and that simply presenting evidence will be enough to persuade the soldier whose motivations are different than pure logic. So, everybody suffers from cognitive dissonance. It's inescapable. In her book, Julia Galoff explores the relationship between beliefs and identity, arguing that identity can hinder a soldier mindset by making it harder to change one's mind. But if someone's identity is to love truth above all else, being a scout becomes more rewarding. So here is the trillion-dollar question. How do we turn narrative-believing soldiers into truth-loving scouts? The inability to be open-minded, humble, admit you were duped is detrimental to human advancement. It's gotta change. There's a movement that can best be summarized by the phrase, normalize changing your opinion when presented with new information. Sarah Abed, an independent journalist, wrote an article entitled, Cognitive Dissonance, the most prolific and psychological plague of our time. And I totally agree with her. When politics and health policies are involved, blindly believing narratives from for-profit corporations and officials and paid actors pretending to be journalists can be literally deadly. People may proudly shame others for making different choices, but when the truth emerges, their cognitive dissonance prevents them from admitting they were duped. Scout seeks a medical cure. I want to use this analogy for this video. Let's imagine your daughter is diagnosed with a terminal disease that Western medicine finds incurable. There are reports of remission, but it's impossibly difficult to find out the correlates. Time is of the essence. Your daughter doesn't have the time or the physical capacity to just try everything. You start researching and putting data together, forming hypotheses, theories, and protocols, and publish them for the world to analyze, critique, add to, and criticize. Now, are you offended if someone lets you know that 70% of your proposed protocol won't work? Will you tell them to shut up and still doggedly defend your proposal? No. You're overjoyed. You don't take it as a personal offense about your research skills or your ability to develop effective protocols. You are thankful to the point of tears. You're also overjoyed that somebody well-versed in your field of research is helping you eliminate things that won't work. After all, you're just after the truth. You don't have an axe to grind. Your job doesn't depend on how many theories you publish. Now, a world expert in the field may call your proposed protocol stupid and explain how they've already tried all of that and explain to you in great scientific detail why it didn't work. While their harsh approach could have been better, you really don't care or have time for pettiness and hurt feelings. You're on a mission and are actually really grateful for the world-leading expert to share their time and data with you. Evolutionarily, people actually fear public speaking primarily because we know that if our tribe rejects us, we'll die. We needed a community to survive, so we fear being judged as foolish or incompetent and losing our social standing. And even though we know it's not life or death, our reptilian brain equates admitting we were wrong with death, so it's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to, in effect, choose death. Even though when someone admits they were wrong, we like it, we respect them more, but we can't see the same for us. But in this current cancel culture, this avoidance seems to be on steroids. What has caused the amplification so much? Let's explore the causes and industries that are at most fault and the ones that are at the most risk. Which high-stakes fields suffered the most? So much of human behavior can be explained by two motives. We want to be right and we want to feel good about ourselves. Dr. Aaron Delvers. Law enforcement is at high risk for cognitive dissonance as they are equivalent to literal soldiers. Growing up watching TV, I always thought it was strange that the police force had a different department for detectives. I incorrectly thought, why can't cops be also detectives in their role? But you can see how clearly they need a differentiation like soldiers and scouts. Politics and lobbying are another obvious high risk for cognitive dissonance. Instead of finding the truth of what's best, everyone votes straight up party lines. But again, this isn't new and has been the same for thousands of years, ever since the ancient political parties of the Roman optimates and populares. People in the business industry have always responded to incentives and tried to do what's best for them. All of these industries haven't changed, but I think the significant changes are in two primary industries: journalism and science. The media. I think the first cause in the present state is the so-called news. With the internet, news agencies have been in a panic. Decades of bleeding red have forced the very nature of news to change. Primarily in seasoned journalist Matt Taibbi's book, Hate Incorporated, Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another, he confesses that, quote, what most people think of as the news is in fact a twisted wing of the entertainment business. Science and medicine. Half of what you learn in medical school will be shown to be either dead wrong or out of date within 10 years of your graduation. The trouble is nobody can tell you which half. So the most important thing to learn is how to learn on your own. Dr. Sidney Burwell. Through no fault of their own, the structure of modern medicine creates an environment where scientists and doctors are exceptionally vulnerable to cognitive dissonance. They are forced into ways of thinking and approaching new information that results in a perfect storm of extreme levels of cognitive dissonance. They are also trapped by astronomical debt levels, in which only one profession can pay off their loans: theirs. We'll talk about this in the next video, but the foundations in which all bio research is built on is holistically missing a proper scientific foundation, and we see evidence of it crumbling on every medical front. So it's basically a perfect storm, and my heart goes out to them. They are basically well-paid, highly respected soldier slaves who can't buck the system and can't pioneer without the threat of losing it all. The consequences of cognitive dissonance in medicine and science can be deadly, as it can too easily lead to misdiagnosis, ineffective treatments, and flawed research. Researchers will often overlook any evidence or change data to please their employers. There has also been a handful of studies that ask medical students why they want to become doctors, with the number one answer not being to help others, but rather their reasons are social prestige, and cognitive dissonance is mainly about how you identify yourself. So all of our hearts should go out to these poor doctors and other professionals in this industry. They are in the hardest position in the world, in the history of the planet, between a rock and a hard place, primed for the highest rates of cognitive dissonance. But we have to suffer the deadly consequences. But there are always outliers. A man I have tremendous respect for is Dr. Martin McCary. He is a distinguished expert in surgery and oncology, with a significant focus on enhancing patient safety and health transparency. You can guess what I like about him the most. He can admit when doctors get things wrong. He's a true scout, and he is fully aware of the dangers in the medical field from cognitive dissonance. In April 2025, he was commissioned to lead the FDA and told a Senate committee hearing that, quote, we need more humility in the medical establishment. You have to be willing to evolve your position as new data comes in. What makes a great doctor is not how much you know, it's your humility and willingness to learn as you go from patients. The sign of intelligence is that you are constantly wondering. Idiots are always dead sure about every damn thing they're doing in their life. I will paraphrase a story he told about his fellow surgeon regarding new evidence. A study found that a short course of antibiotics alone can cure appendicitis, thus not needing surgery. He tried it out and it worked as described. He told his fellow surgeon about the study in his own personal testimonial, but he balked. I don't buy it. I need to see a randomized controlled study. A few months later, a randomized controlled trial was published in their top surgery journal, confirming the same thing. About 75% of people with appendicitis don't need surgery. Relaying this information, his fellow surgeon colleague said, "I need to see 2 randomized controlled trials." The study was well designed and included a 1-year follow-up. But then 6 months later, another randomized controlled trial came out, published in JAMA, confirming the results. Now his fellow surgeon colleague said, "I need to see 3 randomized controlled trials." He told them about all of his personal success and how it's been used for a long time in Europe. I mean, what person wouldn't love not having to cut another human being open if they didn't have to, right? 2 years later, a 3rd randomized controlled study was published in a top journal, and separately, JAMA published an impressive 5-year follow-up results for the patients. All the studies, all the evidence, all the data had spoken. It was no longer an open question. Then he realized he never read any of them. "Marty, I just think people are better off with their appendixes out." Now, Dr. McCary defended him, saying he didn't seem like the money-hungry type. Quote, "He was a dependable and honest guy." Now, I know he's a fellow human being, but I confessed in the very first segment of this video that this is my problem. I just have unlimited contempt for people like that. What kind of human being would willingly and unnecessarily cut into another human being for money? But this is the lot doctors have to deal with, and we as society must turn this around. Condemnation without investigation is at the height of ignorance. Albert Einstein. There is another story of a prominent scientist discussing the evidence of psychic phenomenon. Daniel Dennett was a founding member of the editorial board of the AI Society Journal, who made contributions in the area of philosophy, including intentionality, free will, the ontological of mental states and consciousness, Darwin theory, AI, and the philosophy of religion. He was on ABC News debating the scientific evidence for psychic phenomenon with Dr. Russell Targ, and was persistently dismissive, yet always and only in generalities. Finally, Dr. Targ said, "Let's pick an experiment we both know and you tell me what's wrong with it and I will respond." He condescendingly shot back with, "You don't think I actually read this stuff, do you?" There was dead silence. He blushed, hung his head in shame, sat down, and left as soon as he could. Speaking of Dennett's work, other scientists said that he was, quote, astonished by people maintaining a willful ignorance of anything scientists might find. And yet he was more guilty than the people he looked down on. Do you see why I worry about this about myself? Those who are the most vocal against willful ignorance are often the most guilty. There must be no barriers to freedom of inquiry. There is no place for dogma in science. The scientist is free and must be able to ask any question, to doubt any assertion, and seek any evidence to correct any errors. J. Robin Oppenheimer. How do we fix it? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor and anti-Nazi dissident who talked about these willful, ignorant people and made the argument that they are more dangerous to society than evil. He said that evil can be recognized, confronted, and stopped. The weight of guilt can even end itself, but willful ignorance is impossible to defeat. He simply called them stupid people, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they would not think independently. They followed the dogma, the political party, the leaders, the ideologies, no matter what. Quote, "We must abandon all attempts to convince the stupid person." Here is the problem with his thinking. Everybody vehemently agrees with him, including the Nazis, because everybody thinks they are the smart ones. So his argument is universally accepted and used by the right and wrong, the good and evil, those in cults and out of cults, trying to convince people on the other side to stop being so stupid. So his advice is 100% worse than useless because it only cements people in their false position. So is there hope? Can we change this around? I think we should try. And where do we start? Ourselves. Although I claim to be fair, balanced, and open to new ideas, I have certain philosophies and schools of thought that I follow. There are respected authors and philosophers and teachers, and I read everything they say. One time my friend said, "How do you know this isn't a thought cult?" Ha! I know I'm not in a cult. I don't even need to research. I'm 100% certain. Yeah. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Wait a second. That is exactly what a cult member would think. In fact, I bet I just demonstrated the first two red flags of actually being in a cult. Professing absolute knowledge that you aren't in a cult and unwilling to research. So I felt pretty profoundly uncomfortable with myself. So I know this can be hard. I was pretty embarrassed, but curious too. Was I brave enough to see if I was in a cult? What is my actual commitment to truth versus my own personal comfort? Because, well, it wasn't looking too good so far. So I did the same thing I do with everything, tons of research. I started reading every book and study on cults. Eventually I found the work of the world's unquestioned expert, Steve Hassan. He developed what's called the BITE model of authoritarian control, where you can see if you are in a cult or not. BITE stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control. I nervously took the questionnaire. Luckily, it scored the lowest possible 1 out of 10 in all 4 categories. In fact, it didn't just score low, it was completely contradictory to a cult's methods of recruiting and maintaining controls over people. It was closer to an anti-cult than a cult. Conclusion. Skeptics have a bad reputation, and it's well earned. I view myself as a hardcore skeptic. To me, this means that if an interesting claim is ever made, even an outrageous one, I will try and remain neutral, hold off judgment, and then dive into the research. And I admit it's tiring work to read dozens of books on a topic, to cross-reference, find the original sources, then ask the authors and endlessly wait for replies. It's not glamorous work, but to me that's just the standard life of a true skeptic investigating a claim. But I've learned something disturbing. I've had thousands of discussions with other scientists on whatever topic I'm investigating, and I always think I'm talking to a fellow scout. I'll often ask, well, that's not what the data points to. Where are you finding your information? Then the awkward silence followed by, I don't have to research, I just know. As a data hoarder, I can offer to send these fellow scientists the data so they can review it themselves. Do you know how many have accepted this offer? 0. Yeah. So I kind of learned the truth that almost all claimed skeptics are actually willfully ignorant cynics. Nothing more. They not only don't read, they won't read. All of their self-proclaimed opinions are immutable facts. They are never wrong, and more importantly, they are always right. Other true skeptics out there will jump up and down with confirmation as they've encountered this as well. It is a huge problem. How we can best combat cognitive dissonance is a subject for another video. I just want to bring this problem to light. Everyone is affected by cognitive dissonance. From the beginning, I've admitted having this problem, and I'm aware that it can blind me and others. Additionally, being in this medical field exacerbates this issue as well. Knowing the problem is more than half the way there, though, right? Nonetheless, I promise to you that in all my research, I am just scouting for truth. I have no axe to grind, no agenda to promote, no conflicted interest. I will give you my anthem of truth, to scout for truth with humility, readily admit when I am wrong, and welcome contrary data in the pursuit of accuracy. That is the foundational anthem of truth. So let's build on it. In the next segment, we will uncover the best-kept secrets.
Is Eurocentric science pseudoscience?
Science is a systematic method that builds and organizes knowledge, primarily in the form of testable explanations and predictions based on evidence. This methodology involves observation, measurement, experimentation, and critical analysis. It doesn't claim there are absolute truths, but seeks to offer explanations while being open to new information. At least that's the stated goal. Other people think of the word science as objective, unbiased truth. They think the words are synonymous, as in, science said so, end of discussion. I think most people would agree with Ricky Gervais's definition when he hosted the 77th Golden Globe Awards. He said, "Science seeks truth, and it does not discriminate. For better or worse, it finds things out. Science is humble. It knows what it knows, and it knows what it doesn't know. It bases its conclusions and beliefs on hard evidence, evidence that is constantly updated and upgraded. It doesn't get offended when new facts come along. It embraces the body of knowledge. It doesn't hold on to medieval practices because they are tradition." But is that really true? There seems to be a big divide in the scientific community. Most busy themselves by doing actual science, and yet there is another group more in the public eye. They seem to be the loudest for some reason, that go about attacking other scientists. But let's more clearly define what we call science in the Western Hemisphere as Eurocentric science. There are 5 divisions: physics, chemistry, biology, earth science, and space science. Within these 5 divisions, their collective foundations rest on these 4 cornerstones: mechanism, physicalism, materialism, and reductionism. They are defined as follows. Mechanism says that everything can be understood like gears of a clock. Events unfold strictly orderly, tit-for-tat, in cause and effect fashion. Physicalism says that everything can be described with real properties that exist in ordinary space-time, and that any meaningful statement is provable by logic or mathematics that can be demonstrated by easily verifiable experimental facts. Materialism says that everything, including the mind and consciousness, consists of matter and energy. Anything labeled spiritual, non-physical, or immaterial is nonsense. Reductionism says that everything is made up of a hierarchy of ever smaller objects, with subatomic particles at the bottom. A complex system can be understood by assessing and understanding the smaller components that it is comprised of. We are conscious of these 4 cornerstones of science, but there's one problem with them. Outside of quantum physics and the philosophy of science, they skip the secret of all Eurocentric science. They aren't actual scientific laws. They are philosophies on theories, hoping that one day the evidence will come forth and verify them. Karl Popper was the most influential philosopher of the 20th century, particularly known for his contributions to the philosophy of science. He called it promissory materialism because it depends on issuing promissory notes for discoveries not yet made. A promissory note is a contract that promises you will repay the debt in the future. So they're kind of moving the goalposts and kicking the can further into the future, hoping that evidence will come forth. To explain and extrapolate what these 4 faith-based theories mean, Rupert Sheldrake described them in his book, The Science Delusion, as follows. 1. Everything is essentially mechanical. Dogs, for example, are complex mechanisms rather than living organisms with goals of their own. Even people are machines, lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' vivid phrase, with brains that are like genetically programmed computers. 2. All matter is unconscious. It has no inner life or subjectivity or point of view. Even human consciousness is an illusion produced by the material activities of the brain. 3. The total amount of matter and energy is always the same, with the exception of the Big Bang, when all the matter and energy of the universe suddenly appeared. 4. Laws of nature are fixed. They are the same today as they were in the beginning and will stay the same forever. 5. Nature is purposeless and evolution has no goal or direction. 6. All biological inheritance is material, carried in the genetic DNA and other material structures. 7. Minds are inside heads and nothing but the activities of brains. When you look at a tree, the image of the tree you are seeing is not out there, where it seems to be, but inside your brain. 8. Memories are stored as material traces in the brain and are wiped out at death. 9. Unexplained phenomena like telepathy are illusory. 10. Mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. Now, Eurocentric scientists aren't just going to rely on faith. They are men and women of action. So they've been testing for hundreds of years. The results of this testing have been tens of thousands of peer-reviewed studies about the 4 cornerstones of Eurocentric science. There's only one more problem with the mountains of collected evidence. All the evidence keeps confirming that the cornerstones have been falsified. Let's dive into the evidence. materialism, reductionism, and physicalism. These struggle to explain how qualitative experiences originate from quantitative physical properties. Like, how can the same food item have a wide range of people who love it to hate it? This is known as the hard problem of consciousness, the #1 problem of science, highlighting how we all know something is true, yet it is completely unknown by science. For example, these models emphasize the physical body and its biological processes. Psychological or social factors can't have any effect. The mind can't affect the body. It would falsify and break the model. Only material aspects of illness are permitted, as all phenomenon, including illness and health, can be explained in terms of physical processes. The theory really starts to fall apart when they look at things like the placebo effect, because if it's true, the placebo effect can't happen. If the mind can't affect the body, the placebo effect can't be explained. Yet the placebo effect has been significantly confirmed millions of times in every single properly done study for a century. I bet you've seen it firsthand. It's not even a matter of debate, it's just a well-established phenomenon. But let's continue exploring the foundations of the Eurocentric science. You don't have free will. If society as a whole is to adopt these theories, there is also something they don't want to tell you. We have no free will. Since all mental phenomena are simply emergent properties of the physical processes of the brain, as we are lumbering robots, like Richard Dawkins said, we are just a machine without the freedom to think or do anything. Everything is predetermined. Now, if this theory is valid, you can't be persuaded one way or the other, or any subject for that matter. You don't have to worry about believing or not believing in this theory, because if you have no free will, everyone will agree on everything. And we all know how true that is. Because if that's true, we have another problem. The entire criminal justice system would collapse because criminals don't have a choice. Their crimes were unavoidable. Also, we can't have retributive justice because their actions were mere consequences of factors beyond their control. Presently, punishment is extracted because it serves as a deterrence to other criminals so they can choose to act differently. But since they don't have free will, punishment serves no purpose. Rehabilitation is also useless because it aims to change behavior. Real scientists acknowledge this problem, citing how there are no double-blind, random-controlled trials for parachute efficacy. They know there are more than one ways to get knowledge. It's odd trying to extrapolate a method designed for pharmaceutical drugs to everything else in medicine as well. Reductionist hypothesis in medicine. Where it really starts to get shaky is in medicine. The existing medical model is based on a 400-year-old reductionist hypothesis, which approaches complex systems like the body and reduces them to particles of matter and their interactions. Treatments can thus be reduced to a uniform, systematic procedure. We know the body is a complex system requiring a holistic approach. Reductionist works great for traumatic problems as they generally have one cause. A broken bone or cut is straightforward. But all non-traumatic problems like diseases have scientifically verified correlates with social, economic, philosophical, relationship, past trauma, a feeling of purpose, community involvement, and countless other intangible and even unknown and unknowable factors, not just a pharmaceutical deficiency in one's diet. Dr. George Lomborg, the 17-year editor of the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, and board-certified pathologist Rick Lippin, the recognized leader in the medical specialty of occupational environmental medicine, state simply, quote, "The results of the application of reductionism in modern biomedical research and practice has been nothing short of miraculous. While wondrous for some things, reductionism alone is incomplete." Now, I'm making the argument in these videos that medicine needs to be our first priority because, as the saying goes, a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person only has one. Conclusion. If quantum theory is correct, it signifies the end of physics as a science. Albert Einstein. Einstein said this as a warning. He hated quantum theory because he knew if it was true, the old foundations of mechanism and determinism were dead. Well, it's 100 years later and we know that quantum theory is correct. The foundation did crumble, and yet we continue to build upon it. To summarize, causality is falsified by general relativity. Locality, physicalism, and realism are falsified by quantum mechanics. Mechanisms limits the viable theoretical explanations for psychic phenomenon. Materialism can't accommodate a force that is outside of matter or energy. Determinism fails because of the collapse of causality. Reductionism fails because it cannot accommodate mind-to-matter interactions like the well-known placebo effect. So if the core tenets are falsified by general relativity, quantum mechanics, and the placebo effect, why are they still being defended? This brings us to Eurocentric science's dirty little secret. It's called the demarcation problem. Meaning if there is no evidence for something and the scientific community likes it, like string theory, they call it a scientific theory. If they don't like it, they call it pseudoscience. Like they didn't like the idea of hand washing at first either. And there is a strange, overtly loud group of gatekeepers within the scientific establishment, a sort of secular priesthood that militantly vilifies any theory, basically highlighting how their foundational assumptions have been falsified. As we go back and reflect upon Ricky Gervais's quote from his hosting of the 77th Golden Globe Awards, we can see that while that's the goal of science, in reality, it's not that simple. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake concludes that, quote, Gervais's idealized view of science is hopelessly naive in the context of history and the sociology of science. It portrays scientists as open-minded seekers of truth, not ordinary people competing for funds and prestige, constrained by peer group pressures and hemmed in by prejudices and taboos. This is a chart that shows statistical significance of all papers published in PubMed from 1976 to 2019. If scientific publications were perfectly unbiased, we would expect to see a standard bell curve or normal distribution centered around 0. Most experiments have no effect, or so the highest density should theoretically be right in the middle at 0. However, we can see there is a suspiciously hollow set of missing data in the middle, and then some sharp spikes exactly at the threshold of statistical significance for both sides, with a certain positive bias on the right side, meaning widespread data manipulation is clearly happening. They are putting their thumbs on the scale. So yes, scientists are normal human beings wanting to make a difference, trying to keep their jobs, impress their colleagues, and using scientific foundations that need some improvement. But let's see if we can find a theory with a correct and proper foundation, one that allows us to build higher and better. Because as we see in the next video, we have already built an entire multi-trillion-dollar healthcare industry on an old, shaky one. And the results speak for themselves.
Bitter fruits of reductionism. Everyone badmouths the American healthcare system. They say it's the worst in the world. I disagree. The American healthcare system was carefully designed to maximize profit. And it does it better than anybody. In fact, it does it better than everyone else on the planet combined. It was not designed to heal or cure. We talked about in previous videos how the foundations have been falsified and the major players in the industry have the highest propensity for cognitive dissonance. Rotten foundation, willful ignorance, unshakable arrogance, and obscene amounts of money. What could go wrong? Well, let's see. Iatrogenic deaths. Half of what we teach you is wrong. The problem is we don't know which half. Dr. Albert Hoffer. Decades ago, there was disturbing data published on the high numbers of medical mistakes leading to disability or death. In 2000, as a result of the medical mistakes, the prestigious Journal of American Medical Association, or JAMA, published an initial report stating that iatrogenic death, which is death caused by medical treatment,
was estimated to be the third leading cause of death in America based on statistical models and the rough estimates. In 2013, the Journal of Patient Safety began investigating the hard numbers and counting reported iatrogenic deaths. They tallied over 440,000 deaths per year in hospitals alone where they could get the best data. The numbers become more damning when medical mistakes outside of hospitals, like deadly reactions to prescription drugs, add to the death toll. Christine Martin Anderson, MBA, a senior vice president of Booz Allen Hamilton for the healthcare sector, warns that, quote, unfortunately, only a fraction of medical errors and near misses are actually reported. The numbers could be substantially higher. But the industry does not want any oversight and presumes medical mistakes reporting should be voluntary. However, if one goes to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, one will never find medical mistakes listed anywhere in the list of causes of death. The omission is rationalized by explaining that if the patients were not in the hospital for the original affliction, the deadly mistake would not have occurred. Dr. Martin Marquet and 3 other doctors from Johns Hopkins Department of Surgery wrote an open letter to the CDC in 2016 begging them to classify medical mistakes correctly. Still, as of 2025, the CDC refuses to do so, even though protecting Americans from human error is in their mission statement. Too often, Dr. Marquet admitted, the healthcare system silences people around a problem. In 1982, the CDC was entirely federally funded, yet beginning in 1983, they started accepting gifts from market participants. They now receive millions annually from Big Pharma and other market players. These gifts are highly suspect as the CDC has power to make recommendations towards products of partners that donate. The Office of Inspector General performed an investigation and concluded that the CDC has a, quote, systematic lack of oversight of the ethics program, and points out that 97% of disclosure forms filed by the CDC's advisors were incomplete and 13% were never filed. After all the truth came out about how the CDC lied and hid facts about the COVID-19 pandemic, they have shifted gears with the CDC's current #1 goal being regain public trust. If medical mistakes were calculated correctly and honestly reported, they would reflect the biggest cause of death in America. Yet the healthcare system continues unchecked day after day, with hundreds of thousands silently dying and many more being permanently disabled as the fruits of a bitter seed of a highly profitable system. Unnecessary surgeries, iatrogenic injuries, and misplaced incentives. The person who takes medicine must recover twice, once from the disease and once from the medicine. Sir William Osler, the father of modern medicine. It may surprise you, but surgeries are not regulated by any state or federal oversight. The estimated figure for unnecessary operations in the United States is reported to be between 60 and 70%. The reasons are simple. Doctors respond to incentives. Steve Nissen, the chief of cardiovascular medicine at Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, told the Lancet Medical Journal, quote, the U.S. is just about the only developed country where healthcare is delivered on a fee-per-service basis, and we very liberally incentivize physicians for doing invasive procedures. The economic incentives are just too strong. The figures for the top surgical procedures that are medically unnecessary are 70% of hysterectomies, 36.5% of C-sections, 43% of colonoscopies, 26% of total hip and 38% of knee replacements, 17% spinal fusions, 22.5% of cardiac pacemakers, and 12% of cardiac angioplasty stents. In 2016, the Harvard University School of Public Health conducted a meta-analysis of unnecessary surgeries as reported in medical journals and the media. They concluded that 70% of the reviewed deaths were preventable, 48% from mistakes in surgery, and 33% from negligence. Harvard also estimated that 1.3 million Americans suffered disabling injuries in hospitals annually. Incentives are set up in the wrong direction in the American healthcare system. Quote, the pressures are real. Doctors' income can hinge largely on the number of surgeries they do and the revenue these procedures generate. Those numbers can also determine whether doctors get privileges at certain hospitals or memberships in top practices. Biased media influence. A 2009 study in the Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting found that except for CBS, every major media outlet in the United States shared at least one board member with at least one drug company. As of the making of this video, they all do it now. It is a professional courtesy that few, if any, news agencies will rarely report negative on drug companies because Big Pharma is the main staple of their revenue. View any commercial advertisements during news broadcasts, and the majority are from Big Pharma. Kantar Media, a media agency that tracks advertising, states that in 2016, there was an increase of 65% in Big Pharma ads since 2012. The FDA is also financially dependent on pharmaceutical companies, and there exists a well-oiled revolving door between the FDA, politicians, the CDC, the AMA, and other healthcare organizations. All are well-funded with money from the healthcare lobbying industry. Even medical schools' curricula and treatment procedures cannot escape the influence of the pharmaceutical industry. The AMA alone has one of the largest political lobbying budgets of any organization. On the other side of the coin are doctors and nurses who have no intention to kill, injure, disable, or otherwise harm patients. They are working incredibly hard, often pressured by debt and hospitals' increasing demands for them to see more patients in less time. Doctors and nurses lack authority over the corporations that operate the hospitals. Shareholders have also no vested interest in creating a less profitable business model. Problems with reproducibility in reductionist-based scientific medical testing. The de facto standard in present-day medical science is the controlled, double-blind, randomized, identical methodology and reproducible trials. However, there is a disturbing secret in the reproducibility aspects that few are willing to acknowledge. Amgen, one of the world's largest biopharmaceutical companies, scientists selected 53 foundational studies that are the basis of all the present medical research as it is known in practice today. In attempts to reproduce the same result, Amgen was unable to do so in 88.7% of the studies. Bayer published similar analysis. This led to the sustained effort to determine how many vital studies were replicable. An attempt to replicate 5 cancer biology trials was successful in only 40%. An attempt to replicate the top 100 studies published in 2008 in the top triad of psychology journals, an international group of 300 researchers found that they could replicate less than 50% of them. In their premier scientific journal Nature performed a study of 1,576 researchers asking about these problems with replication. They reported that 70% could not reproduce another scientist's results. Half of the same researchers couldn't reproduce their own work. In addition, due to selective reporting and thereby publication bias, it is estimated that only half of medical studies are ever published. In the published studies, over 1/3 of adverse events are hidden and never reported. This is clearly because these studies would hurt the case for the for-profit drug manufacturers. How can the foundational studies be wildly unreliable? Part of the reason is that there are intangible, difficult to measure, possibly quantum factors at play that the current reductionist medical model is not able to address. P-hacking is consciously or unconsciously playing with the statistics, p-values, confidence intervals, significant thresholds, and sample sizes to force the data to appear to have the desired conclusion. At Stanford University, the C.F. Reinbold Chair of Disease Prevention, John Ioannidis, published a proposal to lower the p-value thresholds for the statistical significance from 0.005 to the 0.05 level in common use today. Ioannidis estimates this shift would move about 33% of research results from statistically significant to merely suggestive. However, this would eliminate countless drugs sold and raise immense negative attention on the industry. Richard Horton, MD, the editor-in-chief for The Lancet, a United Kingdom-based medical journal, concluded, "The case against science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may be simply untrue." A pertinent example of a bias system. The senior medical journalist Julia Bellas at Vox created this graphic that was taken from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, showing that scientists are being forced to manipulate data at every step of a study to conclude whatever results are desired by the client. You can see that all these substances have been neuroscientifically verified to both cause and cure cancer. The New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, fired its chief editor, Dr. Jerome Kassir, because he refused to allow corruption or bribery under his watch. He outlined it in his book, On the Take, How Medicine's Complicity with Big Business Can Endanger Your Health. He was replaced by Dr. Marcia Angel, who then summarized the problems she saw. Quote, "It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. I share these accounts because I don't want you to think that everyone in the medical industry is corrupt. There are people at the very highest levels who are noble and honorable. Nearly all men die of the remedies, not of the diseases." 17th century playwright Molière. So you have a falsified foundation, which explains half of the bitter fruits like the reproducibility problems, mixed with outright fraud and misplaced incentives. It makes perfect sense that the American healthcare system has the problems it does. It seems like Eurocentric science should work, but I'm a proof in the pudding guy. Theories are nice, and carefully controlled scientific studies in the lab are great, but give me the fruits. Does it work in real life? I think we should dive deeper and closer. There has to be another scientific law at play. Let's see where the science takes us in the next video.
When you understand how harmony works, you start to understand everything. There is a mystery about the 9/11 attacks that mathematicians and statisticians have not been able to figure out. After counting all the people who had been evacuated, they calculated there should have been about 6,000 people left in the buildings when they collapsed. Yet for some inexplicable reason, there were only half. The mystery gets deeper. The airplane that struck the first building also had about half of the people it normally should have for that date and time. The mystery thickens. The airplane that struck the second building also had about half the people it normally should have. The mystery becomes more confounding because the airplane that struck the Pentagon also had about half of the people as well. And yes, you know where this is going. The fourth plane also had about half the people it normally should have. One plane having half the number of people could be explained by statistics if you relax the confidence intervals. However, 2 cannot. When you add the third and fourth plane and the number of people in the Twin Towers, the probability is so astronomically small, there is certainly something metaphysical happening here. They noticed the same phenomenon in the 1950s with passenger train wrecks, but nobody knew how or why. When they did the math, the probability was 2 in a billion for just the 4 planes. We commonly refer to this as zero, meaning there is no such reality that something beyond our physical understanding of the universe is happening here. There is clearly a stronger, more determinate, yet entirely invisible force at play regarding how many people remain alive in a catastrophe. The mystery continues further when we look at death. One day I saw this article and it really intrigued me. It reported that in years of peace, there were sometimes more deaths in the military than in times of war. The U.S. government keeps excellent statistics about the death of U.S. soldiers, but this just seemed impossible. I was convinced someone did the math wrong or some shady statistics were afoot, so I dove into the hard data. Then I started analyzing the demographic and morbidity data from 1980 to date. I was looking at the death rates of men and women by age group in the military versus the civilian population. I was convinced I was missing something. My two-pronged thesis seemed completely logical to me that 1. In peacetime, people in the military would have higher rates of dying than civilians because of the obviously more dangerous nature of the work. And 2.
the death rates would be higher in active wartime than in peacetime. I mean, it's active combat after all, right? So I crunched all the numbers and rechecked all the data, and it turns out I was wrong on both counts. My thesis was not only invalid, but when comparing the death rates of people in the military versus out of the military in times of peace and war, the morbidity was the same. As insane and as counterintuitive as that sounds, what this means is regarding death, according to this dataset, in America for the past 40 years, it didn't seem to matter if you are in the military or out of the military, in active wartime or peacetime. There is a certain percentage of the population, for example, in 1990, about 0.12% for 18 to 34-year-olds, no matter what is going on, is going to die. Each age group and gender has its own correlative numbers, but the numbers are so close they're scary. And yes, the article is indeed correct. There are even times in peace where more people in the military die than war. The macro activity just didn't seem to correlate with deaths as you think it would. Yes, the numbers in the military and out of the military do trend upwards and downwards, but they do so in unison with the civilian population. There is clearly a stronger, more determinate, yet entirely invisible force at play regarding how many people die as well. According to Newtonian physical laws, the logical conclusion is that there is no logical conclusion. When a science becomes difficult to calculate, the majority of scientists just give up and call it an unexplained phenomenon and move on. Nonetheless, there appear to be metaphysical forces at play, meaning beyond the physical laws, because the numbers don't lie. The probability of these figures being randomly perfectly in sync over the past decades is 1 in trillions of trillions. And with modern data collection, we can actually survey what happened to the half of the people who missed their flights or were not in the Twin Towers and Pentagon. With the 9/11 attacks, it appears that if someone was in harmony with living, something would happen that would make sure that they wouldn't be on those flights, or something would keep them at home, or they would be late, or something else. We literally have thousands of data points confirming this is indeed exactly what happened. So here we have examples of both extremes, both in life and death, that there seems to be a certain percentage of the population that at any given time, in any given circumstance, is in harmony with living. And there is another data set that is also in harmony with dying. And even if they statistically should live or die, another force moves in or out of the way. So I started to put all this into a sort of theory about harmony. If my thesis on harmony works at the extremes of life and death, what about in between? It's often a mystery of who gets diseases and who doesn't. So if harmony applies to things like life and death, does it also apply to things like sickness and wellness? Well, let's find out.
If my thesis is true, and people are in harmony with being ill and it's cured, another disease will slide in to take its place.
Just like if you were in wartime and you were in active combat and in harmony with dying and peace broke out, death would still find you by another name like a car wreck or another accident. And if you worked in the Twin Towers and you were in harmony with living, some force would find a way to keep you alive, be it you took a vacation or you were late for work that day. But do we have any data about a significant amount of disease being cured en masse? Well, yes, in fact we do. In the early 20th century, modern society saw increased hygiene, faster herd immunity rates due to faster rates of travel, and vaccines start to wipe out infectious diseases. This is a perfect data set because if my theory is correct, if the masses were in harmony with disease, and medicine found a cure for the specific diseases, yet the masses of people didn't change their harmony, they, in theory, would still get another disease. So let's look at the rates of infectious disease in the early 20th century and how it declined to almost nothing. So now here is the trillion-dollar question. Did anything take its place? Well, yes, it did. Immune disorders went up in almost perfect correlation to infectious diseases going down. This left the medical community scratching their heads. Dr. Jenny Machalki, in her book Immunity, The Science of Staying Well, confirmed the link. The spectrum of disease faced by our immunity today has changed considerably from the infectious ones that challenged our health in the past. Germs may no longer be the enemy we face, but the war on our health is certainly not over. We have merely transformed it. So what's the data telling us? It seems that there is a sort of opportunistic and fatalistic phenomenon going on. That it doesn't seem to matter what we do mechanically about preventing deaths, accidents, or even sickness and disease. There, in essence, is a certain percentage of the population that is going to be affected by it. It doesn't seem to matter what actions are taken to prevent it. The essence still happens. We even have a common idiom for this phenomenon. Different places, same faces. Meaning if you move across the whole country in attempts to get away from jerks, the geographical place might be different, but the jerks are already there waiting for you.
Let's look at even more recent data, which we are all intimately familiar with. Look at all the people who would get the flu annually. Every year it spikes, and then all of a sudden it drops to less than 1%. This seems to falsify the theory until you realize roughly the same number of people got COVID-19. Then when that phased out, the pattern resumed to normal. According to the existing reductionist medical model, we should have had the flu and COVID, not essentially the same net amount of people getting sick.
This reminded me about a clip from Pixar's Ice Age, where as soon as a character plugs one hole, another shoots out in its place. So it doesn't seem to matter if medical science figures out how to plug a new hole, because then it will just spread out in another way. And you can see that with the current medical model. If my theory is true, the medical establishment, with its lack of understanding about harmony, is and forever will be just plugging holes. In fact, there's even an official term for it called whack-a-mole medicine. The underlying issue. Western medicine's admitted criticism is that they never address the cause, they only manage or mask profitable symptoms. Alternative or functional medicine practitioners attempt to go to a root cause, but even if they address it and cure it, they will sheepishly admit that the patient will still experience the essence of pain or disease in another way down the road. It's apparent that there is a true underlying issue beneath the physical root cause of illness. And my thesis is that it is harmonic in nature. The pain or disease can be thought of as the bitter fruit of a plant. The root can be thought of as the catalyst that appears to have started it all. But before the root, like an imbalanced diet, stress, or environmental toxins, there is an actual something that comes before the root. The seed. The seed is harmony. Thesis advancement. So my thesis of harmony scientifically and irrefutably works from everything from living to dying, as well as sickness, disease, and wellness. It appears that everyone has certain amounts of harmony to those things, which can be difficult if not impossible to measure. And all of scientific and medical data point to the same thing. The curative lies in changing harmony, not plugging the holes. Evidence of this harmony phenomenon is actually all over the traditional sciences with different names like self-fulfilling prophecy, self-defeating prophecy, Streisand effect, perverse results, victim mentality, Cobra effect, placebo effect, nocebo effect, Pygmalion effect, Gollum effect, perverse incentives, behavior confirmation effect, boomerang effect, and psychological resonance, just to name a few. And yet I bet you see evidence of this in the lives of your friends, family, and even in your personal life. There are countless people who are eating right, exercising, meditating, yet still get major illness and disease. And there are countless other people who are eating poorly and never exercising, meditating, and remain disease-free. My thesis is the determining factor is harmony. It's an unseen force that is difficult to define and impossible to numerically measure with existing technology. Let's define harmony as what someone thinks and feels about their body in relation to sickness, disease, and wellness. And I wonder, can we change our harmony? Being in harmony with your body. People are in harmony in essence with their healthy or unhealthy bodies. In essence is sort of like the genre of music that a certain radio station plays. While all the specific songs are different, they all have a similar vein, kind of like all rock or classical. For example, if people are in harmony with a painful thing, genre, happening to their body, and they go to their practitioner to help them with painful problem X, and if they don't change their harmony about pain in their body, it's only a matter of time before a more painful problem Y is going to happen. If that is cured, then pain Z comes in, so on and so forth. That's being in harmony with painful things happening to one's body. Said in another way, if you're in harmony with mildly annoying or inconvenient things, genre, happening to your body, inspired practitioners can indeed help rebalance your body, but unless you change your harmony, more mildly annoying or inconvenient things are going to come into your existence, because that's what you are harmonically tuned to. After one classical song ends on the radio, it's not surprising that another classical song follows it, and more classical songs will endlessly play unless the station is changed. Well, that's an interesting theory, but is there any actual hard evidence for this in mainstream medical science? Well, let's look. Sigmund Freud is a household name, and is considered to be the unquestioned father of psychoanalysis. What's never really mentioned is that he noted his patients might appear to be cured, but then soon after they would simply develop new symptoms. This happened again and again so frequently he actually coined this the symptom substitution phenomenon. But he didn't know what the cause was or meant. It's a classical music station analogy all over again. More recently there was a doctor named John Sarno, who in 2012 Forbes magazine labeled him, quote, America's best doctor. He was a trained surgeon, but noticed that he never really cured or fixed any of his patients because their malady would just change to something else. Early in his career, Dr. Sarno would fix back problems only to have them come back again with pain, just in a new area. Who knew something else was going on? He noticed this so frequently that he called this phenomenon the symptom imperative, and further developed this theory hypothesizing that it was correlative to emotional trauma from childhood. He said that if you don't deal with the trauma, the body is going to recreate the pain to distract you from your past emotional pain. Quote, if the psyche has introduced a physical symptom, such as back pain, or an emotional symptom, such as depression, which is then temporarily relieved in some fashion without dealing with the underlying emotional dynamic, the psyche will simply create a symptom to take its place. This 100% confirms my thesis on harmony, and the proof is in the pudding. Besides being labeled America's best doctor, he had tens of thousands of cured patients and a wait list decades long. A 2017 book on pain treatments described Sarno as the rock star of the back world. A documentary on his life and work titled All the Rage, Saved by Sarno, was released in 2016. Notable patients of Sarno included radio personality Howard Stern, Tom Sharpling, comedian Larry David, actress Anne Bancroft, filmmaker Terry Zigoff, 2020 co-author John Stossel, television writer Janet Barber, and Sopranos actor Michael Imperioli. All of them and countless other praising Sarno and his work. Howard Stern even dedicated his first book in part to Sarno. There isn't a single practitioner practicing medicine in all the world who hasn't noticed this phenomenon with clients firsthand. Quote, the symptom imperative tells us that by taking away the symptom by use of a placebo or antidepressant will only give rise to another symptom, and the other symptom might be related to something serious, like cancer. He continued to develop the symptom imperative theory, confirming that if you deal with the inner disharmonic factor, the pain stops, and it is never replaced with another pain or malady somewhere else. He taught his patients how to change their harmony. So in answering the question, can you change your harmony? Yes, it is possible. Some people are convinced their issue isn't an inner work or harmony problem because they have actual documented physical problems with their body. But there is a little secret in the chronic pain management world. Let's look at the three major groups of people regarding chronic pain. The first group consists of millions of people who have chronic pain and have medically documented herniated discs, spinal disc arthritis and spurring, and disc degeneration. However, in the second group of people, there is an equal number of millions who also have those same physical problems with the exact same medical documentations and yet zero pain. In The Great Pain Deception, Faulty Medical Advice is Making Us Worse, Dr. Stephen Ray Ozanek confirms that, quote, physicians concentrate on MRI findings and often make faulty assumptions about the significance of them while ignoring the fact that many people with no pain have the exact same findings. And there is a third group where there are untold millions who have chronic pain and no medical documented causes. This group is growing the fastest. And I purport that it may not always be the degraded physical manifestation that is the true cause. That's a bitter fruit from the degraded harmony seed which led to the degraded physical condition. If you fix the harmony and the medically documented pain goes away, then we can be assured that there were harmonic problems. Disharmony could be the actual true cause of all maladies in the human condition. If you talk to any seasoned practitioner, they will indeed confirm seeing this phenomenon in their medical practice, where it becomes a whack-a-mole with new problems that arise only after they've fixed another one. It seems to me personally that attempting to heal someone's present malady without helping them adjust their harmony violates the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. Because all the science confirms that if my thesis about harmony is true, any attempts to alleviate someone's suffering without dealing with the lack of harmony issue, the practitioner is knowingly but inadvertently ushering them into yet more future pain and suffering by another name. Perhaps into other maladies that are potentially incurable. We have an idiom in English that says, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, meaning the problem you have right now could be better than the next unknown problem. If you don't stop and sit down and deal with your harmony, your problems with your body are just going to get bigger and worse until you have no choice but to stop looking outside yourself and start to adjust your harmony. Dr. John Sarno confirms, quote, "In truth, American medicine has done enormous harm. It has misdiagnosed the cause of pain, guaranteeing that even if the patient experiences pain relief due to the placebo reaction, the pain will return to the same or some other location, or, following the principle of the symptom imperative, another physical disorder will take its place. In no way has the patient been healed." The conclusion is inescapable that the psychology behind both the physical and affective, emotional disorders is the same, and that people whose pain is replaced by anxiety or depression are also experiencing the symptom imperative. It follows that good medicine requires first acknowledging those unconscious emotions and then dealing with them. Treating anxiety or depression with medications without in-depth psychotherapy is poor medicine, and may even be dangerous if the symptom imperative leads to a serious disorder like one of the many autoimmune maladies or cancers. These are not fanciful conclusions based on conjecture, they are derived from irrefutable clinical experience. As Dr. Sarno points out, the issues that are causing an emotional response are the true seed of the problem. So let's talk about how harmony works. We can know if our thoughts about our body and health are in harmony with our emotions. Science confirms that emotions come after thoughts. Many people think their emotions cause thoughts, but what is happening is we can think and feel and think and feel and think and feel and think and feel, so it feels like our thoughts sometimes come after emotions. But let's just do a little test to prove it right now to ourselves what is the truth. What I want you to do right now is kind of make yourself angry. Keep your mind completely blank, but make a fist and say grr and stomp your feet aggressively and furrow your brow and breathe in short, fast breaths. Really try and get into it, but keep your mind blank. So, were you able to do it? Did you feel angry, or did you kind of feel silly? Did it seem like you were just going through the motions and pretending to be angry? With no thought as the catalyst, you weren't able to hold on to any genuine anger for more than a passing moment. So now you've proven to yourself that indeed emotions respond to thoughts. Once you can change your thoughts, your new feeling will begin to emerge and you will have taken the first step in your road to personal freedom. So what happens to people's bodies that habitually think thoughts that are followed by negative emotion? One of the founders of psychosomatic medicine was Frank Gabriel Alexander that confirmed that, quote, "Everything medical is influenced in some ways by emotions." John Sarno adds, "There are those in medicine who believe that emotions play a role in all aspects of health and illness. I am one of them. I believe that all medical studies are flawed if they do not consider the emotional factor." All. Wow, that's a pretty bold statement, but exact emotions are kind of challenging, but not impossible to measure, at least somewhat. With modern data and collection techniques, we can now study and correlate people, diseases, and their emotions. There, in fact, have been many credible longitudinal studies with tens of thousands of people correlating emotions and health. Just look at the legendary Hans-Jürgen Eisnig. Hans-Ulrich Eisnig was a German-born psychologist who spent his professional career in Great Britain. He is best remembered for his work on psychology and how it related to intelligence and personality. At the time of his death, he was the living psychologist that was most frequently cited in peer-reviewed scientific medical literature. One of his studies lasted 20 years, and he analyzed more than 13,000 individuals who were healthy adults and ranged in age from 25 to 50. He used extensive psychometric testing to categorize individuals into 4 personality types that relate to their emotion or harmony and how that correlated to disease. In his article, Cancer, Personality and Stress, Prediction and Prevention, he clearly defined cancer-prone personalities. These are the 4 personalities he categorized people into. Type 1. Type 1 individuals have lifelong feelings of hopeless depression. Basically, they want to be nurtured, which probably began with a parent but was transferred into adulthood by another individual who is not the least bit interested in a relationship or nurturing. These individuals feel hopelessly depressed because they can never receive the nurturing that they need. Over the next 20 years, roughly 75% of those who died of cancer had a type 1 personality. 15% had a type 2 personality, and 9% had a type 3 personality. Type 2. Type 2 individuals have been angry throughout life and have never been able to deal with their anger. Over the next 20 years, approximately 75% of those who died of heart disease had type 2 personality, and about 15% had a type 1 personality. Type 3. Type 3 individuals can't make up their minds. He often called them bi because they flip between depression and anger. Interestingly, however, this is healthier than either one of them alone. Type 3 individuals die only 7 years earlier than Type 4, whereas Type 1 individuals die approximately 35 years earlier than Type 4. Type 4. Type 4 individuals are what he would call self-actualized. Eisner called them autonomous. Basically, they say, you can't make me happy and you can't make me unhappy. I am responsible for my own happiness. Happiness is my business. They are in harmony with what their emotions are telling them. They believe they have the power within themselves to control their thoughts and thereby control their emotional indicators. Only 0.8% of Type 4 individuals during the next 20 years died of cancer. Type 4 individuals live an average of 55 years longer than Type 1. I guess we should all figure out how to be a Type 4. With a study this long, with that many people, by the #1 most cited practitioner in all medical science, this unquestionably cements the fact that emotional states directly correlate with physical bodily health. Which is kind of funny to me because the official stance of the American medical establishment today says that emotions have no effect on physical health. Besides ignoring all the mountains of irrefutable scientific evidence, or even common sense, that dictates stress affects physical health and susceptibility to disease. Harmony at the very start. We've talked about harmony all the way up to death's door, but it can obviously affect everything from the very start. There was an accidental discovery of how harmony with food can affect our bodies. Within Western culture, it is universally accepted that glucose spikes from eating sweet things are bad for one's health. The spike promotes hunger, which leads to overeating, weight gain, diabetes, and all the diseases associated with that. However, when certain people ate a sugar-laden cookie, some did not have the expected spike in their glucose levels. Scientists tried to figure out why certain people's body didn't react the expected way. Not finding any physical markers or metrics, they eventually started talking to the participants. Long story short, they found out the people were not worried or stressed while eating a cookie. In layman's terms, they had made friends with food. They didn't have any negative thoughts that were surrounding the potential adverse side effects of eating cookies, and their body responded accordingly. This is not saying that some people could thrive on a diet entirely made of cookies, but that many of the adverse side effects seem to be mitigated by a more positive relationship with food. In like manner, it is similarly possible that negative environmental factors can be mitigated by a more positive philosophy and relationship with the environment. This again confirms my thesis of harmony. There are intangible factors that sway physical agents' impacts on the body, both positively and adversely. It turns out that specific actions, substances, or environmental factors are not the only factor relating to outcomes. Harmony is just as, if not, more important. Both are adjustable weights on the scale, one we have control over and one we do not. In Kelly Turner's excellent book, Radical Remission, she found out the remission of cancer was not in fact random nor spontaneous like the medical establishment claimed. There were consistent, measurable factors that correlated with those who experienced radical remission. She found 9 factors that correlated to rapid, medical, and unexplainable disappearances of cancers. The majority, 6 of them, were intangible, philosophical shifts, not lifestyle nor diet changes. This further confirms again my thesis of harmony. Major philosophical shifts are requisite factors in healing. They change how they thought about their body and cancer. And I'm going to teach you how to do this. Conclusion: different places, same places, and whack-a-mole medicine. My thesis of harmony is indeed scientifically confirmed at every stage of life, death, health, and wellness. Harmony drastically changes the outcomes of our bodies from the very beginning of what we eat to the very late stages of cancer. The good news is we can adjust our harmony at any time on any subject.
In the book Molecules of Emotion, the author Dr. Candace Pert explains that, quote, in the old reductionist model, chronic illnesses such as heart disease and cancer are seen as forces attacking the body, making us helpless victims and incapable of response outside of high-tech medical treatments. But the concept of conscious intervention adds a new element to the equation, a scientifically valued intelligence that can play an active role in the healing process.
You know, at this point, I'm going to call my thesis the theory of harmony. We can say that if someone is in harmony with dying, and war is a major cause of death and peace breaks out, they're just going to die in another way. If someone is in harmony with death, trying to eliminate causes or symptoms won't work either. If someone is in harmony with health, and they are in the midst of a deadly pandemic and war, it doesn't matter. Nothing will fatalistically harm them. Changing harmony is what apparently matters most. Harmony does not only seem to be able to put a thumb on the scale, but it can totally override the balance of any positive or negative weights or inputs. The ramifications of this theory is going to cause an entire paradigm shift for all medicine. So does it even matter if biomedical science cures a specific cancer? No. Nor does it matter if they get a universal vaccine claiming to protect against all viruses. History and medical science show again and again that if you are in harmony with death, living or disease, you will still get death, continued life, or disease. It will just manifest itself by another name. Same face, different place. Does any of this sound intimately familiar? For you personally, do you resolve one malady only to have another one come take its place? Does it feel like whack-a-mole with your body's problems? As soon as you hit one down, another one pops up to take its place? This isn't about being fatalistic, but it's clear that it's time for a fundamentally new approach. Caveat: this isn't about blame, it's about empowerment. Before we discuss this, I just want to add a word of caution regarding the dangers inherent in this topic. The danger is that what is discussed can come across as sounding as if those who still have their malady are in some ways defective or less than those who have achieved harmony. This is not true. It can also be frustrating that achieving harmony sounds too simplistic, especially when you are suffering. There is a limitation of words, and language can often do more harm than good. Anyone who doesn't heal themselves is still a powerful creator in their own life and a whole person. People also may have metaphysical reasons for their malady which are needed in their own personal journey and purpose for this life on this planet. I am certain that there will be those who disagree or are offended by the medical history and science behind harmony and how it relates to healing. That's okay. I'm only relaying this theory of harmony in the hopes that it may assist someone somewhere on their journey. Story time. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. There is a story that one day one of his clients, in discussing her problem, said, "I sure hope I'm causing this problem." Baffled, Jung replied, "Why?" And she explained, "Because if I am doing this, I can undo it." Let's all be like her. See how wise she was? Admittedly, that takes an extremely high level of self-awareness, maturity, humility, personal integrity, and frankness that we should all strive for. But she understood that if she did it, she could undo it, and she was empowered. If she didn't do it, then she couldn't undo it, and she is powerless. This is all about one thing: empowerment. Many healers say that all illness stems from forgetting who you are, a powerful being. We've exposed the shaky, faith-based foundations of Eurocentric science, showing how real science, the unbiased search for truth, confirms that its medical model is an ineffective whack-a-mole game at best and profoundly deadly and dangerous at worst. In its place, the evidence points to a different framework, one that I've called the theory of harmony, which better explains how the mind and body truly function. But while the evidence is so far compelling, a theory this revolutionary requires more. I understand that it is indeed a textbook extraordinary claim. If it truly represents fundamental law, it requires extraordinary evidence as well. It's time to examine this extraordinary claim.
The previous videos have outlined how truth should be our foundation, not money or pride. We have talked about how the political, media, and medical fields are broken beyond repair with cognitive dissonance, and nobody being humble enough to admit they were duped or have caused harm. We expose how the very foundations of Western society are based on Eurocentric science, which can't even be called a pseudoscience because it's been proven false. We then showed you what happens when you build an entire medical system based on a falsified foundation. Mixed in with perverse financial incentives, that makes for a deadly but highly profitable system. Science is forever looking for a unified theory to explain everything, so we took a big step back and tried to find patterns and put some of these puzzle pieces together. Harmonic theory looks promising, but it's highly controversial because humans don't like one thing: personal responsibility, as blame feels better than guilt. And while all these theories are fine, what we really want is proof in the pudding. We want real life results.
We have a perfect example of harmony with Anita Morgiani. When two people she knew were diagnosed with cancer, she relays this story in her highly recommended, excellent book, Sensitive is the New Strong. Quote, "This news anchored the fear even deeper in me because both of these people were close to my age. I began researching everything I could about cancer and its causes. Initially, I started doing this in hopes of helping. I wanted to be there for Sony to help her fight. But I found the more I read about the disease, the more afraid of everything that could potentially cause it. I started to believe that everything caused cancer: pesticides, microwaves, preservatives, genetically modified foods, sunshine, air pollution, plastic containers, mobile phones. This obsession progressed until eventually I started to fear life itself. They were going through the full treatment: chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, stem cell, everything, and I didn't see them getting better. It increased my fear. I feared the treatment of cancer, and I feared death. I wanted to do everything I could to avoid cancer, and everything I did was driven from a place of not wanting the disease. My research broadened to include how to avoid cancer. I purchased all the supplements that were antioxidants and anti-cancer: curcumin, CoQ10, omega-3, chlorella, vitamin C, green tea extract. I took boatloads of these supplements every day. I grew my own wheatgrass so I could take fresh wheatgrass shots every morning, made super green smoothies, and started to follow an anti-cancer diet: collard greens, kale, lentils, and lots of raw foods. But back then I was obsessed. I changed my diet depending on the latest article I had read, the new findings. I installed a reverse osmosis water system. We measured electromagnetic field readings to determine if we needed to make any drastic changes in our environment. I was determined that I wasn't going to get cancer because I was so vigilant and I was fighting against the illness. If I missed a dose of my gazillion supplements, I felt incredibly fearful, and I would make up for it by being even more vigilant. I was exhausted from my self-prescribed protocol, working extremely hard every single day at keeping cancer away. My focus was completely on cancer. And do you know what happened? I got cancer. This shows what you are in harmony with trumps action, so working on your harmony must be the #1 priority. It's more important than anything else, because it has a bigger weight on the scale than anything else. If you are trying to improve your health but aren't working on your harmony, doesn't matter what path you'll take, it won't get you to where you want to be. So two people can have identical bodies and take identical actions, and one of them thrives and the other one becomes riddled with disease. It's not about action. It's about harmony. You can do the wrong action, and with harmony with wellness, it will succeed. You can do the right action, and without harmony, you will fail. To finish Anita's story, the cancer shut down all of her organs, she went into a coma, and she had an NDE, or near-death experience. Here she learned to change her harmony with her body. She realized who she really was and came back. In her NDE, she learned, your inner state creates your reality. Your outside world indicates your inner harmony. Morgiani realized her attention and thoughts about cancer harmonized her with cancer. The emotion of fear was her inner being indicating that she is on a path in which she will not like the destination if she continues. When she realized this in her NDE, she stopped the thoughts that were harmonizing her with cancer and death, and she embraced her true self, thus harmonizing her with a healthy body and extended life. It's about being, not just thinking. Positive thinking alone isn't enough if you feel fear or unworthiness underneath. It's more about who you are being. True change comes from aligning with your authentic, magnificent self. Self-love is crucial. This was the biggest lesson. Before, she sought approval by putting herself last. Realizing her inherent worth and loving herself unconditionally allowed her true essence, love, to emerge, which led to her healing. When you think loving thoughts about yourself, you are in complete harmony with who you really are, and your whole life reflects that love back. Allow, just don't attract. Focusing on attracting specific things often comes from fear or lack. Instead, we just need to become and allow. Trust the universe, be yourself without fear, and you know you're worthy. When you're in that state of self-love and trust, the right things flow to you naturally. You are in harmony. We are all one connected energy. We're all part of a universal energy which is pure love. Your individual state impacts the whole. So being your true, loving, magnificent self is the best way to contribute. It uplifts everyone. We projected a small portion of our consciousness into this body, into this time-space reality. Our consciousness is connected to the larger part of us. Being who you really are is the most important fact of life. Trying to be like others is ridiculous. We already have a them. We need a you. In your joy-purposed life, being authentically you, unabashedly you, fearlessly you is why you are here. The bottom line is the universe reflects your inner harmonic state. This means that harmonically living authentically with self-love and without fear lets your true magnificence shape your reality. And how you feel about yourself and who you are the real creative forces. Now, I understand that harmonic theory is admittedly an extraordinary claim. Carl Sagan popularized the concept, quote, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. He was rewording Laplace's principle, which says that the weight of an evidence for an extraordinary claim must be proportioned to its strangeness. I kind of like it. For 100% certain, this thesis is extraordinary. Are the laws of the universe harmonious in nature? We are connected to a source energy that communicates with us with our emotions. Do we get what we are in harmony with, want it or not? Intended or not? We can cure ourselves from anything, even stage 4 cancer, just by changing our thoughts. Extraordinary claims, indeed. So where is the extraordinary evidence? I'll show you. Let's finish Anita's story. After her NDE and all her organs started working again, within a week, all of the cancers that riddled her entire body disappeared, and the doctors couldn't find any trace or disease in her. Anita Morgiani makes such a claim and was immediately met with skeptics claiming she probably wasn't sick at all. Dr. Peter Coe was such a skeptic, and unlike the vast majority of doctors and medical scientists, he was a genuine skeptic, not a willful, ignorant cynic. He talked to Anita for many hours over the phone, getting all of the medical history. She sent him her medical records, including photos and notes of the last days of her life, going into the hospital, and all of the diagnoses with the symptoms, lymphoma, stage 4B. After poring over the records, he verified everything, and the first words out of his mouth were, quote, "Lady, whichever way I look at it, you should be dead." He said that he had never come across a case of full remission from such advanced stage of cancer, let alone such a rapid rate. But he kept digging. Anita put Dr. Coe in touch with their family general practitioner, Dr. Brian Walker, who confirmed that he'd been astounded by the recovery. Dr. Walker reiterated that he'd never seen such a rapid remission from such an advanced stage of cancer either. Dr. Coe spoke with Dr. Walker for some time and his observations and progression of my cancer over the years. Dr. Walker validated and endorsed many of the American physicians' findings. Dr. Coe then contacted the press and made sure there was a reporter present at the conference to report my story to the local newspaper. She was spontaneously cured of cancer in every organ of her body and lesions all over her skin, and it all being medically verified with her records meticulously scrutinized and verified by literally thousands of highly skeptical and cynical board-certified doctors from dozens of countries around the world, unquestionably satisfies the requirement for extraordinary evidence. And in truth, there is no amount of evidence that will ever convince willful, ignorant cynics. I've had hundreds of discussions with doctors from around the world, and in truth, every single one that is claimed to be a skeptic is in actual reality a willful, ignorant cynic. You can give them all the data and they will never read it. They are in a difficult position where cognitive dissonance makes it impossible for them to admit they were duped. Few, if any, can ever admit they dedicated their life to a falsehood. It's just too impossible for them to bear when they are in a job professing to help people. They view themselves as too noble and honorable to ever be convinced they have done something wrong. If you ask them how much evidence would they need to change, they generally have no answer and will walk away. Cognitive dissonance is too painful. There is no quantity or quality of evidence high enough to make the cynic ever change. But we don't have to worry about them. We can move forward. Now, let's synthesize all of this data and harmonic laws and to see if there isn't a better medical model. Exploring alternate healthcare models. Any healthcare practitioner will very quickly realize that the existing, now falsified medical model is lacking. For almost 100 years, people have been exploring better options. Let's explore historical medical model theories with a knowledge of how the universe works. Psychosomatic medicine models of the 1930s. Introduced by pioneers like Franz Alexander, this model focuses on the interaction between physiological factors and physical health. The word psychosomatic is highly polarizing because it was generally used by men to discount women's very real problems. Because according to the now falsified medical model, they shouldn't have had any problems. It should have been labeled stress-caused illness, and this is very serious. It can paralyze you, it can make you blind, and even kill you. Today, it is much more broadly accepted that stress and illness are linked. Why this misses the mark is because it's not the psychological or physical stress that causes the illness. It's the lack of harmony that is the cause. Humanistic model of medicine of the 60s. This emphasized empathy, compassion, and the human connection for medical care. This is another great advancement, and without the human connection, compassion, and love, people die. In fact, if you want to cut someone's health and lifespan in half, the easiest thing to do is put them into solitary confinement. Holistic health model of the 60s and 70s. This emphasized treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, rather than just the symptoms of disease. This is another great step forward and another piece to the puzzle. Unfortunately, the medical system translated the mind as the brain, and that it must be deficient in pharmaceuticals. Patient-centered model of 1969. This is popularized by Michael Balint. It emphasized the understanding of the patient's subjective experience in fostering the doctor-patient relationship. Yet another piece of the puzzle. This is the number one most important factor in healing psychological problems, is how strong the relationship is with the psychologist or psychiatrist.
Ecological Model of Health in the 1970s. This highlighted the influence of the environment, social, and behavioral factors on health, often used in public health and epidemiology. This adds environmental factors, but it's lacking because there are people exposed to environmental toxins that thrive, and some that aren't exposed and don't thrive. There's too many outliers.
The biopsychosocial model of 1977. This is proposed by George Engel. The model integrates biological, psychological, and social factors to understand health and illness. I really like this one. This guy was awful close. Critiques of his model include: it was very complex. It integrated multiple factors that were time-consuming and resource-intensive to measure. And it was very subjective. Psychological and social components are very difficult to measure objectively. This one factor, meaning lazy scientists find it hard to do, is probably the greatest single factors of slowing down the advancements of the human race. Don't get me started. It is complex, but human bodies are complex. But it's still missing something. Before every single root, there is a seed. The root isn't the cause of the plant. The seed is. Focusing on the root doesn't stop more seeds from germinating. Social determinants of the health model of 1980. This focus on factors on how income, education, and social support impact health outcomes. This is so interesting that proponents can say, tell me your zip code and I'll tell you how long you live. They say the life expectancy gap between Chicago's poorest and most affluent neighborhoods is close to 30 years. However, they gloss over the outliers, and they shouldn't gloss over them. They should stop and study the outliers, because that's when you start to learn why. Outliers point to laws. But yes, we know harmonically birds of a feather flock together. This makes perfect harmonic sense. Transactional Model of Stress and Coping, 1984. This is proposed by Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman. In this model, it examined how individuals manage stress and its impacts on health. This is another model emphasizing stress as the root cause. They're still forgetting the seed comes first. The Functional Model of 1991, founded by Jeffrey Bland, it focuses on identifying and addressing the root causes of disease through personal treatment. This is highly popular as it's much more science-based approach to alternative medicine. It's still root cause focused, meaning the problems just transmute to another one. The Spiritual Health Model of 1990s. This incorporated spiritual beliefs and practices as part of the holistic care. This one starts to point out how life purpose is important, and they nailed it. This is one of the 3 factors that I call the health hurdles, that if you don't have, don't bother trying to heal. We'll talk about these more in depth later. Cultural Competency Model of 1990s. This stressed the importance of understanding and respecting cultural differences in the healthcare delivery. This is another piece to the puzzle. Different cultures have different efficacy rates based on pills versus shots. Even the color of the pill matters. Integrative Medicine of 1993. This is championed by Andrew Wild. It combines conventional medicine with evidence-based complementary and alternative therapies. This is mostly the basis of the alternative functional integrative schools of thought. They have what's called the lifestyle imperative.
Diet and exercise. Diet and exercise.
And don't forget supplements and detoxing. Lifestyle Medicine Model of 2004. This focuses on lifestyle changes such as diet and exercise, stress management to prevent and treat chronic diseases. This one is the same as the last, but mainly focuses on just the lifestyle imperative. Narrative Medical Model of the 2000s. This was developed by Rita Charan. This model emphasized the role of storytelling and narrative about the understanding of patients' experiences and improving care. I like this one because it starts to integrate cognitive behavioral therapy and philosophy into healing, one of the 3 hurdles that we're going to talk about later. But all of these are missing something. They are foundationally missing how the universe works, because you can't find the cure of disease unless you understand the cause. The true cause of disease is not random, not because of sins, not because of genetics, not a lack of pharmaceuticals, not a lack of supplements, not because of toxins, not because of lifestyle choices, not dietary choices, and it's not an imbalance. Because on every single one of those factors, you will find people who made the right choice and still got sick, and others who made the wrong choice and never got sick. There are trillions of data points to confirm it, and you've already witnessed it in your life. All the data points to one inescapable fact. The cause of all disease is disconnection from source energy, who you really are, infinite intelligence, your inner being. Therefore, the order of operation is first, connect you back up to your source energy and learn how to get in harmony with your inner being. And then infinite intelligence will guide your action through inspiration to the fastest, cheapest, most perfect, efficient path to healing. Now, all the other modalities can come into play and used as directed via harmonized intention and followed through with inspired paths. The process of healing is to understand who you are and why you are here. Then you get in harmony with your source energy, inner being, whatever you want to call it. Set your intention for a good feeling body, get in alignment with that desire, and followed through with inspired action. This is how you heal. What doctors will never tell you and what every medical trial misses. Since everything is about harmony, the reason why you hear what's being broadcast on a radio station is because the radio is tuned to that frequency. The brain isn't like a filing cabinet. It's a broadcasting and receiving mechanism. Every aspect of your life is like this radio. Let's say that in essence, regarding aspects of your life and body, everything's connected, you have it set on painful things. You go to your healthcare provider and they look and they say that your painful problem is because of lifestyle or genetics or point to lab results or saying that you may be deficient in X, Y, or Z. But those indicators aren't the cause of the painful problem. They are the fruit of what you are tuned to harmonically. When you pinch yourself off from source energy, yes, everything stops working optimally. You will absorb fewer nutrients. You will heal slower. You will break down faster. That's not the cause of your pain. That's a result of pinching yourself off. All practitioners from all schools of thought will say it's an imbalance. It is not. If you plant a weed in fertile ground and tend to it properly, it will grow and flourish. There is no imbalance in this situation. Nothing has gone wrong. Everything is in perfect harmony with the laws of the universe. Now, it's true you don't want that weed in your garden, but nonetheless, you planted it, you took care of it, it's there. Now, your practitioner might work their magic and get rid of that weed, and you might leave the office pain-free and in love with your provider. But you never changed the radio station. It's still set on painful thing. And here is the little secret no doctor will ever tell you. Patients always come back complaining about the same pain or more likely, another pain in their body. This was explained by the Harmony video. This is what America's best doctor called the symptom imperative, or what Freud called the symptom substitution phenomenon, or what modern medical doctors observe as whack-a-mole medicine. Now do you see how everything fits together perfectly? I've seen this every single day for years. And now you can tell what every medical trial suffers from. Let's say a protocol has 100% cure rates and everyone jumps up and down as they leave. But what they will never tell you and what they never follow up on, because it's beyond their scope, since people never changed the station in which they were harmonically tuned to, the problems transmuted or came back. We're going to go over this in depth and go over how to change the station in the next videos. But let's see if we can't find a medical model that honors the laws of the universe and science as truth. If quantum theory is correct, it signifies the end of physics as a science. Albert Einstein. We already know the fruits of the reductionist medical model are grossly ineffective and deadly. Quantum science explains nature and behavior as a matter of energy on a subatomic level. As Einstein points out, if quantum theory is correct, that would disrupt the very foundations of physics and therefore all science, including biomedical science. The materialist and reductionist hypothesis seems logical to the observer. We can reduce complex systems into a matter of smaller parts, yet there is no actual scientific basis for materialism. In Dr. Kastrup's 2014 book, Why Materialism is Baloney, he points out, quote, "Materialism is a reasonable castle built on top of rotten foundations." Quantum physicist Harry Strapp extrapolates, quote, that the fundamental ideas of classical physics were not just limited, but wrong. Cornell psychologist Daryl Bem states, quote, "The phenomenon of modern quantum physics are mind-boggling, but they are so technical that most non-physicists don't know about them." Dr. Kelly adds, quote, "Few working psychologists and neuroscientists, let alone the public at large, have any conception of the fundamental significance of quantum theory. Classic concepts and approximations are often sufficient to support the concerns of the very special physical sciences, and quantum mechanics is scarcely mentioned in the context of general education, even at the college level. Yet it cannot be emphasized too strongly that classical physics consensus that underwrites practically everything now going on in psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy of the mind has in fact been completely undermined by this tectonic shift in the foundations of physics." Nobel laureate Niels Bohr adds, "Anyone not shocked by quantum mechanics has not understood it." Quantum theory may indeed be the new standard in all science and is steadily moving towards scientific law. Dr. Rosenblum and Cutter point out, quote, "Quantum theory works perfectly. No prediction of the theory has ever been shown in error. It is a theory to all physics and thus to all science. It is the most battle-tested theory in all of science. It has no competitors. Henry Strapp confirms no experimental outcome predicted by it has ever been falsified." With the problems of the existing medical model so self-evident and quantum theory being so recognized, we can conclude there must be quantum factors at play in the body as well, pointing to the need for a new medical model. A small shift in the acceptance of a better medical model will eliminate the paradoxes and allow practitioners to start using intangible yet potent factors. Senior scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences says, quote, "On the beneficial side, we can anticipate improved health care through a vastly better understanding of the mind-body relationship. We may see the development of technologies that treats aspects of the mind-body system that are well understood in the wisdom traditions, but are ignored by Western medicine." Existing science requires tangible factors, yet what if unmeasurable factors are at play? What if patients are participating in intangible ways of healing? As quantum physicist John Wheeler points out, to describe what has happened, one has to cross out that old word observer and put in place a new word participator. In some strange sense, the universe is a participatory universe. The quantum scientific evidence to the mind-to-body connection is overwhelming. It is time to embrace a holistic medical model that honors the quantum science's new discoveries. Western medicine has often stumbled upon many of these same findings as placebos, yet mislabels them as nuance or, quote, unexplainable paradox. A new holistic model that utilizes the latest discoveries in human nature, medical science, and quantum theory honors the mind-body connection has been developed. With this model, the paradoxes that have plagued modern medicine since inception have a finely workable, scientific, evidence-backed explanation. And what I'm proposing for you here today is what I'm calling the quantum medical modality. And it works on harmony. Let's explore how it plays out in healing.